Hi folks, welcome back to the workshop. I'm just trying to find somewhere to put the camera today that isn't in the way sort of stuff, because I'm actually working down here on weapons and armour. But strange sort of thing, C.G. Jung coined the term synchronicity. And he said, when you start researching a project or doing something, everything else sort of falls into place and starts happening the same around you. And I keep finding this happening with projects that we do here at Wildfire and shows that I work on and events that I do. And I was just idly scrolling through Facebook trying to think what on earth I was going to do a video upload on today, because this March has 5 Fridays, or 4 Fridays, but 1 extra compared to every other one. So I was a bit at a loss of what to do for a video, and I've been a bit rubbish with uploading recently, but I've been really busy with. I'm sorry. And thank you for sticking by me and still subscribing and things like that. And it will be improving as the summer goes on. I will spend more time on the videos, and the next craft videos coming soon. We're doing the review of the Wildfolk Challenge on Monday night. Because I'm actually at rehearsals for a show on Sunday, so I'm not going to be back until very, very late. And the last thing we need to do is sit down at 11 o'clock on Sunday night and talk about craft stuff, especially when some of us have to get up the following morning for work. So, why is today a bit odd? Well, a couple of things are happening today. One, I've got like an hour to continue working on my combat gear. This is the falchion that Jack Butler very kindly donated to me. I've taken the pointy bits off and rounded it down to a more universal handle. This is going to get heated and bent slightly, and it just needs sanded off and the rust taking off it. But I'm also working on 2 sets of armour. Now, one set is behind me here, and this is the jousting set for Alnwick Castle, which is being returned to them in around about an hour and a half's time. But what I'm going to do is add some padding and foam bits in the striking edges, just to give me a little bit more protection for Scone Palace before going out to IMCF, because I don't want to get nobbled at Scone. I can disappear over there. The interesting thing is, I'm working on this armour today, and I'm finishing up armour for Alnwick Castle, which is the long-term residence of the Earl of Northumberland, now the 11th Earl, I think. But 558 years ago today, in 1461, was the bloodiest battle ever fought on British soil, because today is the anniversary of the Battle of Towton. Now, I don't know how much you know about the War of the Roses. I don't know how much you know about your history, but Towton was fought between 2 opposing sides. It was part of the Bloody Cousins War, or what we normally know as the War of the Roses. It was fought between the Lancastrians and the Yorkists in a place just outside, well, between sort of York and well, a small village, Towton, just between York and Lancaster on the outskirts. And it was a pivotal battle, and it saw the death of some of the renowned leaders. It was fought between, on the Yorkist side, Edward of York and the Nevilles, Richard and William Neville, as the banner commanders. And then on the Lancastrian side, Henry Beaufort, Henry Holland, and Henry Percy, and other commanders. But Henry Percy, the then 3rd Earl of Northumberland. So this is where it gets a bit odd for me. My white boar, which is Richard III's mark. But that would make me a Yorkist. And I'm not sure that I really am. I think that King Richard got a hard time and badly reviewed because he lost, ultimately. Yeah, he probably wasn't a brilliant king, but he can't have been as bad as the legends say. And I think he got a bit of a bum deal historically. So I've always considered myself sort of I quite like the idea that Richard wasn't the king that everyone says he was. And obviously when I've been playing with reenactment, I've always been a Yorkist archer. So there's that. But now I live in a house in Northumberland that is owned by the Alnwick estate, which means that technically I'm a titheman to the Earl of Northumberland and I pay my rent directly to him. For the last 3 years working at Alnwick Castle, we've done a show with the Historical Combat Company called Harry's Boys. And that is Harry Hotspur Percy, or Henry Percy IV. And we've been his on the which is fought just outside of Wooler, and will be featuring in my next Wild Walks video. But here's the thing. As an old school supporter of the Sons of York, I'm going to be walking into Alnwick Castle, and I do this every year at Towton. I always wear my boar, mainly because I haven't got a Percy Crescent, or I wear that as well because I think it's massively important to remember people that died, not just in the wars and things. But I'm going to be walking into Alnwick Castle in around about an hour and a half, 2 hours time, to return a set of 15th century style armour to the Percys, essentially, on the day that Henry Percy, 3rd Earl of Northumberland, was killed in what's been termed as Britain's bloodiest ever conflict on our own soil. I mean, they reckon that the Lancastrians had a massive advantage of around about 20,000 men, and some sources sort of put the numbers at between 25 and 30,000 troops on each side, some even higher. You know, the top number is 75,000 men took to the field. Now, I've made a couple of notes because it gets a bit complicated on numbers after this. 75,000 troops potentially took to the field on both sides. York had around about a 10,000 man deficit across their entire army. The estimations of the dead that were published in 1461 in a record that was circulated almost immediately after the battle put it at 8,000 Yorkists dead and 20,000 Lancastrians. But the problem is you can't take this 100% as rote. Even though it was recorded at the time, it was recorded by a Yorkist. So obviously, propaganda being what it is, they were always going to publicise the Yorkists having a greater victory, even though technically Towton was an absolute rout for both sides. It was a nightmare. So the conservative estimate is 19,000 men lost their lives on both sides. I'll let that sink in for a minute. 19,000 English men and Scots and Irish on one day in one battle. Now, to put that into context, that's the same number of men as died on July 1st, 1916. That's the same number of men as died in the Somme assault in World War I. And we have memorials to the Somme assault, and we have great things at Remembrance Day for the Somme and the Battle of the Somme, and memorial days for that. And Towton has somehow disappeared into memory. It wasn't even 600 years ago. You know, it was, I mean, where are we, 1916, what's that, say 100 years, give or take. It was 5 times longer ago than that, which isn't really that long historically when you think about it. Not to decimate possibly up to 38,000 people from one country on both sides. 38,000 people in medieval Britain. You know, it's a lot of men to die. And apparently, I mean, today's a beautiful day outside. It's sunny, it's warm. I'm in my shorts underneath my shorts in the workshop. And I can't imagine the difference between this and the conditions were 558 years ago on that field, because it was recorded that there was driving snow and thick cloud and fog, and the armies couldn't see. And what happened was the Yorkists attacked into the Lancastrian line, sent their archers forwards as skirmishers who shot arrows into the lines from all sides. So there were men dying from the very outset of the battle, and you'd be climbing over the bodies of the dead in this frozen, semi-trodden slurry of blood and mud and metal. Must have been hell on earth. One of the heralds famously describes the river at Towton, the little rivulet in the middle, as turning into a killing field and running red with blood of both sides slain. It must have been a horrific place to die, and that's exactly what happened to Henry Percy, 3rd Earl of Northumberland. He died aged 39, leading the van. So he must have been seen as a great warrior leader to be leading the vanguard of the Lancastrian army, but he was charged in it. We don't know whether he died of wounds after the battle or whether he was killed at the battle specifically, but he was one of at least another 19,000 men that lost their lives. So again, it's something I do every year. It's a weird one. I don't know with Towton. I was only a territorial soldier, but I think it's important to remember conflicts when people lose their lives, regardless of the politics behind it. Whether you're remembering the human loss, the young men, as it almost always is in warfare up until recent times, the young men, the boys, some of them 14, 13 years old, that went out onto a battlefield to fight and die for something that they maybe didn't even believe in, but maybe just didn't have a choice. So whether I agree that maybe the Plantagenet line would have been the best one to carry on down in history, or whether I think that the right thing happened at the end of Towton battle and the right king got crowned and the right royal family went forwards, none of that matters. What matters is the sheer scale of the men and boys that died that day. 19,000, 38,000. There are some estimates that say even up to 60,000 because they put the numbers at 50,000 on each side. When you watch videos, the Pathe videos and things like that of the Somme, of those British soldiers going over the top and being mowed down, and then the explosion behind the lines of the German trenches going up, and the day that my old corps got their recognition as the Royal Engineers, not the Corps of Sappers and Miners, that fateful day in history that's so well remembered. When you compare it to those that remember Towton, it's very small. And I think that's an incredibly sad thing, because if we as a nation today, because it is March 29th, and it is the day that we were originally supposed to leave the EU. Now, I'll leave my personal thoughts aside on that, but if we are to be proud of ourselves as a nation, we need to remember our history. And I don't think many people remember Towton. I don't think many people will remember a lot of the battles from that point in the War of the Roses or the Bloody Cousins War, unless they're like me. And they do bizarre sports and weird hobbies and a bit of an armchair historian. So, yeah, it's an interesting day for me today, because I always do the Battle of Towton. I always remember it. I've been to the memorial a long time ago, and it was wonderful. There's a little cross in a field. The chapel that was originally built by Richard III fell into disrepair and collapsed after he died at the Battle of Bosworth. So, it never actually got made into the site of remembrance that it should have been. So I've I've been at the site, I've walked the battlefield, it's very sombering. Sobering. It's like walking on the battlefields up here. They still hold a sense of place and a sense of gravitas, and Towton especially, you know, it's a mass grave. So I always find remembrance challenging, having lost friends and people in conflict. And I often find the big battle days where you look back and difficult to remember, because just thinking of the loss of human life on that scale, but then weird things like this happen where I'm in my workshop working on swords and armor and ready to go and literally march through one of the gates in the castle wearing the gambeson and carrying the armor to take it back, to give back to somebody within the castle walls of where Henry Percy lived, and where not all that long ago his army were getting ready to march south to fight for what he believed in. And there's this real bizarre feeling of, I don't know, just a connection beyond, like, oh yeah, that's cool. There's something there. I was just cutting down the guards on my sword and I went, wow, 558 years ago, by now, the battle was already fighting, They were already bleeding and dying in the mud. But this week, this time, somewhere, somebody not engaged in the battle was doing exactly what I'm doing now, knowing that they had to go and get the armour to their lord or to the man who paid for it. And it's quite it's a bittersweet experience. It's quite a cool thing to be able to say this is something that we're doing. And I'm linking in with this sort of almost forgotten past of Britain through what I do, through the skills and the crafts that I've learned and developed. And by keeping these traditions, by keeping these memories and the history alive and talking about it, I think we can, in a weird way, sort of change the world for the better. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think if you look at the scale of life lost because two people wanted to be king of a country and they commanded men to walk out and die for them, and you look now because we can't agree on which leadership should be in a different country or who should have control of the oil, men go out and fight and die for it. There's that much change. Do we really stand that far removed from the men that put on the shining armour and took to the field on that day in 1461? Shouldn't we have changed by now? Shouldn't we look at that number of dead and say, this is abhorrent, this is awful, this shouldn't happen? And then you turn on the news. So there you have it. My thoughts on a beautiful sunny Friday, on 29th of March, on the anniversary of the Battle of Towton, fought on Palm Sunday in 1461. My little tip of the hat to all those men who fought and died for whatever reasons. And to say, more or less, we say remembrance. We'll remember them. Now, there won't be a video going up at 8 o'clock tonight because I'm going to be probably sat in a pub somewhere with my tankard and a beer, raising a glass to those that died at Towton, and to those that have died all the way through history fighting for ridiculous wars. I'm very glad to have the armour project finished, and in a way even more so that I'm handing it back on this historic day, because it adds a bit of weight and gravitas to the thing that I'm doing. I think I'm going to have to look more into this period of history, because the War of the Roses, the 1400s, 1500s now is such a big part of my life, with the armoured combat, with fighting in the IMCF, with the living history shows that we do. I feel it's a part of history that's been painted and glossed over a lot for schools, and for sanitised for school history. And for those men like Henry Percy, for those archers like, I don't know, William, they deserve to have the real story told. So yes, there's a folklore and storytelling video going to be coming, and I'm hopefully going to be doing, one every couple of weeks. But I think there's also a need to dive into the roots of the history of these places and of the people, and not the great lords, not the bannermen, not the great names. Sure, they're going to be the easiest to find, but I mean, what was it like for, I don't know, let's pick a random name that hasn't been used in film or TV at all as a standard English name that might have been picked up to be thrown out on a battlefield. William Thatcher, why not? What was it like for him? Not a knight, a lowborn man from Cheapside, who was maybe almost press ganged into the army, maybe forced to join up, maybe recruited in part of a levy, standing in that battle line, staring down the knights of York in their armour. Their stories deserve to be told as well. So we're going to have to do some digging. And if you watch this live, or you're watching this later on down the line on my channel, and you think this is something that you'd like to get involved with, drop me a message. Sorry, I've just seen a message from Jake and I talked around a lot, but not really about. I think you're right, Jake. Yeah, it's the history's talked about, but it's in that cold, clinical way of historians, not in a practical way, not where they look and they say 20,000 men died in 3 hours. And that isn't died with explosions. You couldn't kill 40 or 50 at once. That was hand to hand, 300 yards or less, longbow arrows raining down all over, in driving sleet and snow, with your helmet dropped. You wouldn't have been able to see a thing. It would have been freezing, men screaming and dying, horses screaming and dying all around you, and then walking forwards to take this to the enemy. And that isn't talked about. And I think it really should be. I think the human cost of wars, of things like the Wars of the Roses or the 100 Years' War or anything like that, should be talked about more. And they should be commemorated. Every last man jack, and we'll never know for sure how many died, because even if we excavate the battlefield completely and find all the skeletons, they just died of wounds months later in 3 hours. And then take a conservative estimate that 10% of the army would have died afterwards. Another 7,500, 8,000 men. 42, 45,000 because of one battle. The countryside of England must have been a ghost town. You just can't imagine it. And I know when I walk back into the castle later with the armour to go and return it to the Percys, there's that little bit of Yorkist in me that's going to want to smash things. Anyway, I have about half an hour. I've got a lot of work to get on with, so I'm going to leave the camera rolling after talking you through my thoughts on the anniversary of the Battle of Towton. And I'm going to get cracking down here so you can sort of see what I'm doing just for another 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'm really going to have to put the camera down, get power tools out and get everything sorted. But what are you doing tonight to commemorate and to remember the men that lost their lives at Towton? Do you think we should do something? Do you think it matters? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely interested. And if you find anything in this video intriguing, interesting, thought-provoking, or even educational, just hit the like button. And if you're not already, subscribe. If you're wondering what on earth these places I'm talking about are, jump on the rest of my videos and look up the Wild Walk series, because on there I go to a lot of the places that we're talking about now for the people that we're talking about, you know, the lords of England, where they came from, where they're going. And then next month, Bamburgh and Homildon battlefield were massively fought over. So if you're an armchair historian and you like things like that, jump on. Stay tuned. Right. On. I'd like to say a massive thank you to Team Sweden, IMCF, for completely failing to take their roll mats home with them, as I still have some left over which I can use to supplement my armour. So basically what I'm doing now is sport optimizing my armour, adding a bit more padding into the shins because it's very thin over the front of my leg. I'm concerned that it really thin over that particular area, so I just want to try and get the best amount of protection into them. So I'm going to start off with a full cover of padding, and then see where that takes me. Adapt from there. I probably don't want it full length. I'm almost certain I don't want it all the way around the front, but if I start on a piece, I've got a template. And then I can reverse that. The biggest problem I have in this is when I get a heavy person on me, this lead edge of the armour catches on my leg and drives it down. And I don't want that to happen because it then digs in and hurts and makes me move my foot, which makes me lose my balance. You know, here's what I was saying at the start of the video. Here I am. Yes, okay, I'm using modern materials. Yes, this is, you know, camping mat foam rather than using wadding and leather and improving my Akaton and rig underneath it. But here I am, stood in my shorts in partial war regalia, working on weapons, ready, or getting ready to go and fight. Now, granted, it's a tournament, so that's different. But I'm still getting ready to go and fight. It's just, I'm doing it specifically today, on the anniversary of Towton, which is, it's very bizarre. And the more projects I work on, obviously the higher strike ratio you're going to have for things matching up, but the more projects we work on for around this period, the more weird things that happen. My last Wild Walks video, I found a church that relates to an old project. If you haven't watched it yet, go and have a dig in there, because, oh goodness, isn't that a strange coincidence? Well, once or twice is a coincidence. Right, so flip that over, template the other side. Oh, sorry, I missed that comment. This could be about to go horribly wrong. Let's try and get it back. Where did it go? Let's just do live chat. All messages are visible. Is this your personal kit? Hello, Mark. Yes, now I'm working on my own personal armour. Just for the next like 20 minutes while I've got the time. And you know. So yeah, this is my IMCF fighting kit. And these, no, they're not my underwear, they're a pair of shorts. But I've got these, I've got my shorts on so that I can literally lift up and take my armour and just go, right, how much gap have I got? Does it fit? Because I don't want it completely snug. I want it to have a bit of give. So this is very much trial and error going forward. Trying to make sure I've got, oh, look at that, nice sharp blade. It's one thing I've learned from cosplay props is cut foam with a razor sharp blade. So keep the whetstone, make sure it's really, really sharp, and then it cuts a lot easier. So the plan with this is it will just provide a little bit of like impact damping over the front. Now I know some sports guys, some of the fighters frown on it, on modifying your armour in this way because it's not historical, but the crowd can't see it. The marshals don't see it. Hopefully other fighters don't see it. So, you know, I don't see a problem with it. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a sport. It's not historical recreation. We're not trying to be medieval knights. At least certainly I'm not. That's the other line of work. I think having the kit, if it gives you an option to have better protection or better defenses, then why the hell wouldn't you? To be quite honest, make yourself as safe as you can in a sport like this. And if this is going to give me a little bit of added protection, well, I'll take it. So yeah, it's hardly armouring, it's more foam crafting, but I think we're 50, no, we must be like 46 days away from Ukraine now. So I'm just trying to spend a couple of hours a day on my kit, a couple of hours, or an hour a day on my kit, a couple of hours training, just trying to get ready so that I can go out and, you know, be the best fighter I can be at in the tournament, and specifically not let my team down. And the biggest thing of not letting my team down in this case is not having crap armour. Oh yeah, I'm feeling better about that already. Oh, for a weird moment there, I thought I'd put that on the wrong leg. It's okay, I haven't. Well, I'm feeling pretty good about that. That's better. So, it's a rough concept, it works. Problem is, it's a bit big, so I need to trim it down. So I think I want this bit to stick out underneath, but not the edges. So, I'm going to hold it there. I'm trying to be really clever and put the absorbing foam padded side close to me so it won't get too sweaty, but I've got a horrible feeling this is going to make it pretty unpleasant to wear. So that sits in there. Take this down a bit. And again, no doubt I'll get plenty of abuse off fighters for doing this on my armour, but it's personal choice. Personally, I like having shins that work. So let's see, that's going to sit there. Oh yeah, that's going to be a million times better. And then once I've got this cut and sorted here down on the front edge, I'm going to attach by rivets a layer of leather that comes out that will actually link to my sabatons. So I've got a full sort of not articulated ankle, but like a full pad around my ankle that'll sit in and just like hopefully do its job and stop me getting smashed in feet. Because bendy bits are notoriously hard to armour. You look at any medieval treatise, it's always the bendy bits that the kill shots go for. And there we go. And then that will get strong glue in there. That comes down a bit. Just got to get everything in the right place as well, because I haven't worn this since. I haven't worn the greaves since Nationals. There we go. I'll get that on there. The problem I was having at Nationals as well, the reason I'm adding the padding is there was a lot of movement. As I was running, they were jiggling around an awful lot, which was making it really, really hard to actually stand because they kept dropping down, which I'm not going to do now because that's where they arm on. It might also be my arming point wasn't quite straight. I did do them last minute, they do need repaired, but that's around about 100 times better already. Well, it does look like I've taken a fairly serious bash to this greave because it's very bent out of shape. Yeah. That's interesting. Because my other greave doesn't have that big gap in it. Just armour everywhere. Yeah, that one almost meets up. See, this is the other thing. I've worn some of the armour since for practice. I haven't worn these. That is a very big gap. Oh yeah. Safety first, isn't it? Pop you up there. And you get a better view. Oh. And you get a better view. Oh, nice. So. That's better. So now instead of having, now put some padding on that, and that should fit a whole lot better. So look, let's strip padding. Offer it up. Oh yeah, a million times better. There we go. Happy. So yeah, I need to disappear now, because I've got to go and load a suit of armour into a car. Sorry, onto my wagon for the wagon train, and then follow the army south. I've got to go down to Alnwick Castle, so I shall end this video in the same way that I started it, and it says it certainly makes you think. When you're in a situation putting on this armour, making repairs to armour and weapons, sporting goods, these are bullet weapons. These are for sport combat. They're not sharp, and they're not designed to kill. But 558 years ago, right now, they were sharp. And they were designed to kill. Men and boys half my age were standing shoulder to shoulder in a blizzard of snow, fighting for their lives, because their Lord and Master commanded it. We'll remember those that died at the Battle of Towton, and I will every year. I'll always wear my boar. So I might be a Percy now, but I'm a Yorkist at heart. And if you're watching this video and you've made it all the way to the end, thank you for sticking with me. I'll try and go live at about 8 o'clock tonight. And we'll raise a glass to those that can no longer. To those that 558 years ago stood in that field at Towton, charged the opponent's lines, and fought to the death. Because they gave us the country that we have now. That we had. Because Because win or lose, they shaped part of British history. And we should thank them for doing what they did to bring us to where we are now as a people. We should never forget them. We should never forget anyone that died in any conflict, regardless of political motives, regardless of the reason they were fighting, regardless of the side they were on. In war, a lost life is a lost life. It's one person that won't go home to their significant other, won't see their children if they have them, won't go back to see their mother or their father. As it somebody said, war does not decide who is right, simply who is left. Makes you think, doesn't it?